episode 21 or whatever. Is Keith and Di and Matt and Audrey Karam. We talked last episode about teaching consequences and this whole idea of, hey, parent, if you're going to say something, you got to follow through with it. You can't just tell the child that something's going to happen and you're not going to follow through with it. And as our friend Larry Carnahan said on last show, you have to let your yes mean yes and you mean no, and drawing a line in your sand with the kids. We also talked in the last show, Matt and Audra and Di, about has consequences lost its meaning when some of the most powerful leaders in the world, nothing happens to them. People can just do what they want to do, it seems. Let's continue the conversation around consequences. Does it hold any water in 2024? Matt, Audra.
We hope it does. How about that? Our little ones of the day and children need to understand that if something is done, if they don't develop a skill, if they don't learn a technique, if they don't develop into these type of people that can handle this adversity, then where are we all going to be? And so the consequences come from inaction or action, depending on what happened. But it's so important. We think consequences, we hope consequences still have an appropriate place in the family household. How about that?
To go bigger to the worldview and the political, I don't know that I'm educated enough to speak on that. But I do know within the confines of a home and a family, it's say what you mean. But I think another thing that you stirred in my mind, Keith, as you were talking is a lot of the parents aren't willing to, whatever they issued as the consequence, like that woman we were talking about earlier, she didn't want to leave, she wouldn't have to leave the pool. But so before she said it, she thought of an acceptable consequence, right? So keeping them on the sidelines or having a timeout. And a lot of parents aren't willing in this day and age, we've noticed, to make that sacrifice on themselves, because now mom has to leave the pool and she doesn't want to leave the pool. And I'm an adult, darn it. And why are these kids running my life? But I'll tell you what, if you don't have control between the ages of 2 and 10 and 12, you're going to have a lot bigger problems than having to leave the pool for 5 minutes with your 3-year-old. And so I think that's a really important thing for parents to understand is that, there's a lot of times that Matt and I had to give up things and the parents that we worked with, because it was more important to teach the message and the consequence to the child at the time than my own happiness for the moment.
And we all know as parents, it's so much easier many times for us to do the job, right? If we talk to our oldest and they need to wash the dishes, right? After that struggle happens a couple times, pretty soon, sometimes as a parent, you think it's just easier if I did it. And unfortunately, it's true. That is 100% factual. But is that still in the best interest of the child?
It's a disservice.
Yeah, they haven't learned what they need to learn and assume it's going to take time. And it's okay. But that's the hard part is, do I invest the time, the energy, and continue to show and teach, or do I just end up doing it and now the child never learns? Right?
Yeah. And Di, I imagine, so you have, your daughters are older than my kids, and based on your experience, really it's all about teaching and educating now, isn't it? There's no parenting coming from you and Christy. You're not talking about consequences. They're old enough to know that shit goes sideways if they don't do the right things. And I'm thinking, Di, you and Christy are there really just to support them when they fall or prop them up to champion them. Am I making that right? I guess assumption? Di, I don't have older kids yet.
I got to say, like, at the ages that they are now, it feels weird to have to consequence, right? Like our eldest daughter, it doesn't really come up, but she's a really self-reliant, but there's still lots of teaching moments.
Yes.
But we're not here to discipline, but we do like to talk about potential consequences based on our choices. So there is a lot of learning from that perspective. Now, my 19-year-old, she's, let's just say, maybe not as self-reliant quite yet as my 21-year-old. And so with her, it's just more conversations, right? And questioning, why did you make that decision? And was that the outcome you were expecting? And how can we do it differently next time? So there is those kind of conversations, but it's really different now, as kids. Like, I remember one time taking their electronics away for a week, right? Like, because we got to a place and I was just fed up and I took it. And we honored the week. We kept it the whole week. And that was like one of the first times that I actually honored and maintained the commitment. But that they knew after that, if we asked them to put electronics away, they put them away. So they were tweens at that time, effective.
And I think it was probably hard on you when they didn't have
Oh,
the technology for that
it
week,
was.
right?
Oh, trust me. There was moments my wife and I, and we should just give them back at least their iPads. You know? Like, and then we're like, no, we can't. We just got to
Yeah.
stick it out. And
I
it
think
was rough for a couple of days, but after that, actually, we just started having a lot more fun as a family, to be honest.
yes, yeah.
Sure.
You have to get over that hump of
Yeah.
this is uncomfortable. I don't like it. And I think it's important to remember that, parenting, when people say parenting is hard, they say it for a reason. If you're doing it right, it's hard. It's not all roses and fun. It's hard.
I recall the conversation I had with my daughter a few years back when I was trying to, so she's 14 now, and it probably would have been when she was maybe 9 or 10. And I remember trying to teach her a moment, or I'm not going to use the word discipline, but teach her. And she looked at me like, yeah. And I'm like, no, I'm actually serious right now. She's, oh yeah, Dad. Because I'm pretty open with my kids. I'm pretty even keel, probably dialogue like yourself. And I had to look at her and I'm like, no, I'm actually serious. This is not good. And she's looking at me like, oh, you are serious. I'm like, yeah, I am serious. Like there's consequences right now if you're not really paying attention to what I'm saying, because, and it was, but that was a hard moment for me because it's holding your kids to a certain standard that you want them to hold to teach them. Right. So
Yes.
it was a moment for me as well. I can tell you.
No, I think that's a valid point. Go ahead, Di.
I was going to say, I keep coming up with this idea around this because I think we talked a bit about sort of social norms. We've been really, I think the three of us we're addressing this from North American perspectives. Let's be honest, right? So,
Agreed.
Fair comment.
And I just want to bring this up because also, Keith, we know where our listeners are.
Yes.
Right, we've got we're growing. We've got dads in Afghanistan watching the show.
Wow.
You are bang on, actually. I'm glad that Di, go on that because you're absolutely right, man.
Yeah. So I want to know, where does cultural relativism fit into this? Because I've got some friends that I remember growing up with, and they were of different backgrounds, different cultures. And so the way that they would be disciplined would be very different than, say, how my parents would discipline us. And so it was really interesting to see that. And I'm wondering, where does this fit in? Because I do also understand us in our sort of North American ways.
Mhm.
We aren't necessarily as open to the other people's perspectives and how they do things. Like, and I remember my first year of philosophy at university, right? And the professor was talking about female circumcision.
Yeah.
And the debate that heated up in class around that was remarkable. A very hot topic.
Yes.
But in some countries, that's just the norm. They've done it for centuries. And so who are we to judge them for that? And again, it's hard not to judge because it's a very sensitive topic. So I'm curious, just where does that fit into this conversation on consequences or disciplining our children?
Okay, so I would like to bring up a different topic or idea.
Yeah, please,
a little bit, if
please.
you don't mind. Okay.
Yeah.
We have a nephew that went through medical school here in the United States. He had a girl that was in his class, and her dad said to her, I don't want you going out at night. I don't want to see these kind of conduct. If I do, there's going to be a problem. She didn't quit. The end of the story is he disinherited her.
What?
She made the mistake once. He warned her and said, if this happens again, next time you come back, I'm giving you a check and you're out of my life.
Out of our whole family life. And it happened a second time. And he wrote her a check and said, you're no longer welcome here. You can't come back. We're not including you.
Oh my goodness.
Was
in
that
North America, right?
cultural difference? Is that a cultural difference, or are we speaking about a North American cultural?
That family was from China.
Okay. But I think it plays to Di's comments though, because perhaps to this father, normal for him. And I can tell you, Di, I appreciate bringing it up, right, Di? Because we have a big audience in Afghanistan, Egypt, and Thailand. I'm serious. We're trending in all three countries right now. So Di, it's a really great question, which is culturally, because the man from China, he's no, I got one then, dude. You weren't living by my rules. So Di, it's a great question, which is how does this affect people culturally?
Because also religion plays largely into these conversations as well. And that's a hot topic in itself, right? Because I know it divides countries. I don't have to talk about the cliche conversation now, but it's like more people have died in the name of religion than anything else. So
sure.
And I think it all plays into these sort of general understandings of how things are done. Like even when we lived in Bali for 2.5 years, my family and I, it was interesting, but I had to remind myself quite frequently because I would see children sometimes being disciplined.
Yes.
And
Right.
There might be a smack across the face. It could be like
Yeah.
grabbing them and jerking them by the arm. And what we might think is really rough or aggressive or uncalled for, but to them, that's just normal. It's just
Mhm.
Right.
what's done. And the
Yeah.
kids, they're normal with that too. The kids aren't thinking other, they're just like, damn it, I got in trouble again. It's nothing
No, yeah.
other than that. So I just know it's very real to the topic that we're speaking to. And it's how do you navigate that? Because how do we do this in a way that doesn't create judgment or positioning saying this is the right way, this is the wrong way?
And that's why I wonder, which is I think which led us to this conversation around consequences. The world's a small place now, right? We're all connected, we're all sharing intimately.
Yeah.
Maybe the idea of consequences are so watered down than how you were raised, Di, or how I was raised, or Matt and Audra here in North America, where maybe there's a new definition for that word, right? Where you perceive, we all perceive it one way over here, but it's defined differently in 2024 and moving forward because the world is such a small place. Back when I was growing up and you were growing up, Di, probably your circle was when I got a smack on the rear end, probably everybody in my family's friends and network gave smacks on the rear ends. That was the consequence.
Definitely. It was normal.
Yes.
It was normal to our circle, right? But because the world is so big now, the idea is, no, I don't know if I really agree with that anymore. It's certainly an interesting point of view, I should say.
I also remember my dad talking about going to school and being disciplined by the teacher and hold your hand out. Here comes the ruler. Like my dad told me those stories. I never dealt with that in school, but I remember my grandparents talking about it, my dad talking about it, my mom talking about it. But again, we hear about these stories of even just regular discipline without any physical conduct happening in schools and people just going over the top, getting upset about it. And so I don't know. I just think we talked about the united front, and it's hard to do that when school systems do it one way, parents are doing it another way, the general culture of wherever you're living does it another way. Like, how do you reconcile?
Your social feed you're tuned into is doing it another way.
Yeah.
Right? Like everywhere you look is doing it differently, it seems. Matt
and Audra, what are your thoughts on that?
I guess one of the things I wanted to say is here in the state of Arizona, our school system is struggling to produce academic results, if you will.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a U.S. News and World Report. They look through the states and they rank states by their academic performance.
Okay.
Our state in Arizona is 48th out of 50. Okay.
Wow.
Is that terrible?
There's only room to go up.
But all of our teachers in Arizona are quitting. We have, when this school season started last year, we had 11,500 jobs that needed filled because the teachers were so disenchanted that they didn't even come back to work. And so when you look at consequences, if you talk to some teachers here from elementary to middle and high school, the kids here have no consequences. They can act any way they want. The parents don't support the teachers in the classroom for acting the way they're supposed to act by sitting still, listening, doing their work, not disrupting the class, and all those things. So that consequence issue seems in the United States to have rolled into the classroom and is affecting a lot of other people as well.
And go ahead.
Yeah, so go ahead. No, you go ahead, Audra, please.
And I think a piece of that is too, and what we have listened to and heard is a lot of teachers saying obviously the parents aren't supporting the teachers anymore. And there's some teachers who are off center, obviously, but I think the mass want to be there, want to help these students, but they're not getting the support from the family. So these kids are coming in unruly is what we're hearing, and they don't disrespectful. Our last two did high school only here in Arizona. They were educated somewhere else, so we're happy with that. But they would say, Mom, Dad, they would come and you would not believe how disrespectful these kids are in high school to these teachers. And I was just assuming it was they wouldn't listen to them, but it was verbal attacks to these teachers, and these teachers had no, I want to say recourse. That might not be the appropriate word, but they had no way to manage a classroom, and one or two kids would offset the whole ability for them to teach the lesson that needed to be taught. So these teachers are overwhelmed with kids coming that aren't disciplined at home and aren't receiving consequences, and now they're supposed to be the major the person who you can't do that in that small segment of time. It all starts at home, and I think there is a huge responsibility on the parents to do what we need to do to make these kids successful in the classroom, whatever their age at, and then on future into life. And we can't minimize the value. And it's hard, again, as I say, and you guys, I want to chuckle because in our generation, the kids were whacked in school. There was a
Yeah,
wooden
yeah.
You
board.
got paddles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The smack on the hand. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got that in parochial school and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But it's a whole different time.
Let me ask you this then, because what's really interesting, just recently in the last couple of weeks, they pushed the bill in Ontario. So where Toronto is, so Toronto, Ontario. Ontario now, the school board, public school board, has banned electronics. So
Oh.
between school hours, kids are not allowed to have their devices during class times. And because what they found was it was creating just a lot of chaos with lack of attention, distraction, but also challenging from just leading a class functionally. So there is a sort of a split perspective on this. There's some people really upset about it, but in general, I know the teachers are quite happy about it. But I'm wondering, like, where does that fit into this whole conversation? Because clearly they recognize, hey, we got a problem here.
Mhm.
Yes.
It's not just an isolated issue, it's a bigger issue. And they are
Sure.
recognizing that screens, the amount of screen time kids have today is remarkable.
Too much.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. And so I'm curious if in Arizona is electronic, and I'm not here to point the finger and say this is the reason. Obviously, it's a top-down solution, I would think. You know, the parents got to
Sure.
also be
Sure.
involved in this, but
Yeah.
is electronics and screen times playing into this?
Yeah, I would say there's a part because you bring me to a point, and in Arizona, I don't know each specific district might
Yeah.
have a different rule. I do know some teachers ask the kids, and this is the younger grades, if
Mm,
you have your phone, you put it in a basket and then you take your seat. Does that happen? Can they follow through on that? I don't
yes.
know. But I think what's interesting when you were sharing some of the information is our world has changed because I'll tell you what, when we were in school, and hopefully when you were in school, you didn't hear about school shootings. You
No.
didn't hear about school bombing. And now this is all these parents are afraid when they send their children off to school. So they're like, they have to have their phone. I mean,
Yes.
it's that link that these parents feel so scared that they're sending their kids off to it's not a school, it's not a place of education all the time anymore. It's a scary place. And I think that enters into the decisions people are making as a society as well as parenting. And I can't say that I have the answer for that, but I just think it's a scarier time and parents are making decisions based upon what they know is in the world right now. And we didn't deal with that. I
No,
would
you're
hope
right.
when you guys were kids, you didn't hear about that.
No, I remember I was in high school during Columbine.
Okay.
Oh.
And I think I just remember that happening and everybody was just shocked.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
just in shock and
Horrible.
disarray and just like, what's going on in the world, right?
And
now
I've
it's
heard
become so much more like it's unfortunate. Like I heard the stats the other day and I was like, we don't even hear about some of these shootings that are happening. And
they
it's
say
like
they quit
remarkable.
talking. Yeah, they
Yeah.
quit talking about it because it
Yeah.
elevates the appeal, the interest. And I'm like, I thought it slowed down for a bit. And then I was hearing some documentaries and they're like, oh no, it's still
Yes.
happening.
They
They
just
just
not
have
talking about
learned.
it as much, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, like, oh man.
When you can see that a child they're selling bulletproof vests for kids to wear to
Yes.
school.
And
I mean,
backpacks. Yeah.
Yeah, this is not the same. There's bigger issues there for sure. So it's not the same time, but consequences are important.
You know,
Yes, yeah, you're right.
so when I went to parochial school, okay, my
Mhm.
dad walked in, talked to the principal, and he told her in no uncertain terms, if Matt messes up, you paddle him. And when he gets home, I'm going to do the same. She had full authority to do whatever
Great.
she wanted because I was a child, right?
Yes.
And that's the way it was back then,
Yeah,
if you will,
we're not
right?
saying we agree with
And-
that. That's not
Yeah,
very
yeah,
nice,
but
That's how I grew up, right? And so now when you look at what parents do or do not support in the school system, if you're going to give your child to someone for all that daytime hours, if you don't philosophically agree with them and you don't work together to give that child a better direction, just like unity, we talked about mom and dad having unity in the consequences, right? If the
Mhm.
school and the families don't have unity on these issues together and they're not working together, of course there's going to be confusion. Of
Yes.
course it's going to be chaos.
Mhm.
And no wonder it's not working the way you would want in the best interest of the child. We, just like in our martial arts school, we would have,
Yes.
let's say,
Good.
two parents that got divorced. Okay.
Yeah.
And one parent would say, I have an order that says they can't be near the child, and I want you to enforce it. And I want this. And I would always tell mom and dad, stop. Guess what? We are here for one purpose, the child. You guys work all that stuff out. If you're not supposed to be here, man up, don't be here. If it's okay to be here, but we're not the policemen, right? We're here for one thing. That's to benefit your child. End of story, right? You come second. And so to us, we put the kids first.
And I think just right there, we drew a line in the sand. We weren't wishy-washy, right? And I think the parents like, okay, I guess I got to figure this out on my own. And we're adults. We should be able to do that. And so I think, yeah, that's a great analogy of drawing that line in the sand. This is where we stand on this issue, and that's how we feel. And it's okay with us. Is it okay with you? And you need to make that decision.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm glad you brought up the martial arts thing. And this is my last little comment because I want to hear from Keith too. I was thinking about just martial arts and my experience. Like it was just such a wonderful way to learn focus, but also just respect of that authoritarian figure.
Yes.
And I just remember my senseis and coaches and just, they always had that, but I know I wanted to make them proud and happy.
Yeah.
And so it created this repeated sort of habit around just respect. And so I wish, because I do look at other countries where it's like a mandatory thing. Like they have very much organized fitness, and martial arts are a big part of that, based on the philosophies that it also introduces to kids at a young age. And I just wonder, like, let's bring it back. Let's try to figure out a way to make it so, I don't know. I love martial arts. And I just think there's such a wonderful way to just bring kids up. And
to us, we used martial arts as the vehicle for those transferable life skills to be taught. And so just like you had said, you want to teach them respect of people. You want to teach them respect of property. And martial arts does that, right? And it goes further. You learn focus, right? If you have to do a task or a skill, many times it takes all of your attention, not only intellectually, but physically as well. And you have to marry those two together to get a successful outcome. And they learn teamwork and so on and so on. And so our parents wanted that black belt behavior at home. But without kicking and punching, if you. And so that's what our goal in raising our children was to have our children be more successful in life than we were.
I love it. Yeah.
And how do we do that? If we don't give them the foundation to make that happen, then as parents, as a dad, I'm not doing my job. My job is to get these little ones ready for life, in my mind. And we used martial arts as a vehicle to do that in a tremendous way. And it's real easy. And you guys would agree, if you say too many things to somebody else, you may get whacked.
Yep, that's right.
And you learn real quick what you shouldn't say.
I don't want to do any more push-ups. Thank you.
I'd have them do 10 push-ups, sit-ups, and jumping jacks. I would take one of my assistant instructors and have them watch them just to make sure they executed them. We'd have them run some laps. Nothing that hurt them. Is all it did was make them stronger. And it gave them a little bit of time to think about what they did. And then you move on, right? You don't hold it against them. You don't continue to punish them for it. It's one and done. Move on. And I always tell parents, not all children make good decisions, and that's okay. That's our job as a parent, to help identify those as a consequence and to help them, hey, next time, maybe if you do it this way, it'll be better. And so that's a huge, but yes, in that environment, we were able to affect change in other ways. And we had talked with Keith in the last show that we had a boy that was in 6th grade that was the biggest bully in school. He was twice the size of all the other boys in the class. Wow. And so the principal called us and said, hey, do you think you can help him? And we said, we don't know. But the principal said, both his parents are in jail. He's being raised by grandma, and she's doing her best, but she can't handle him.
Yeah.
It took us 2 weeks to get him straightened out. First, we taught him that we cared about him. Okay. He didn't feel anybody loved him. And that's horrible in this world.
He felt it was a privilege to be there too. Yeah.
And we set boundaries.
Yeah.
And guess what? If it didn't happen, I was the consequence. Okay. It took a little bit to get him, because he never had any consequence. He doesn't, even though grandma says, do this or do this, if he didn't do it, she was of the age that she couldn't enforce it because of his size. Right.
And I'm the consequence if we go over time, Matt and I.
I love this conversation. This is such a great conversation.
I agree. I absolutely agree, Di Manuel. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to wrap up today's conversation because I'm going to leave a hook. We've been talking about consequences. We've been talking about being consistent with consequences. Yes. We've talked about different cultures. We've talked about different generations. what it's telling me is that we want to invite this conversation of Di to a bigger round table, because you've also posed the question, and what's happening here today is you're actually making magic for me as a media guy. I've always envisioned this show to create dialogue and create conversation around. And I want to invite Matt and Audra back, and Di, I think we might want to invite a few other people back to talk about something you brought up, which is this idea of gadgets in the classroom.
Sure.
Yes.
That's huge.
It'd be great to have a roundtable as a show. I think that's a great idea.
Hang on,
Yeah,
Di.
I love it.
Some agree, some wouldn't agree, some have different points of view on it. So we're going to wrap up today's episode around this. I'm going to throw an actionable item on the table. And my actionable item is, if you're going to, as a parent, have consequences, you got to be consistent. The 2 C's, right? We talked last episode about following through on what you said. I'm inviting you here that if you're going to have some consequences, they just have to be consistent over and over. And it's going to hurt sometimes. It's going to suck as a parent when you're doing it with your kids.
Yeah.
But you got to be consistent, because the moment you give up, everything you've done before that means absolutely
You
So-
lose, you lose the power. Go ahead. Sorry.
you lose all that credibility. So we're going to wrap up today's show. Di, what a great chat, man. Matt and Audra are awesome.
Get some rock stars.
I agree, my friend. I agree.
It.
We're going to come back.
Watch this.
Oh, he's walking
Uh-oh.
on.
I picked up a pretend mic just so I can do this.
Oh,
I love it. I love it. Oh man, I wish I had my sound effects ready. I'm gonna get them ready for next time. Here's what we're gonna do. Well, I'm gonna work over the next number of days. I'm gonna invite you, Di Manuel, and you, Matt and Audra. If you have some folks you want to invite to the conversation, I want different generations and I want different cultures. And I want to continue the conversation around consequences, around a larger round table with some other folks. But I also want to talk about this idea of gadgets in schools. And whether they should be allowed, not allowed. I think it's a great conversation, because my ambition here, guys, to keep growing this thing is to have conversations that might move the needle for others. We chop it up, circulate it on socials, and get people engaged with it, because that's to get people engaged. Matt, Audra, thanks for joining me and Di today.
thank you guys.
You guys are great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Absolutely. We'll see you guys real soon. Di, hang around one quick second, and then we're going to come back, walk up Matt and Audra.
Thanks again. See ya.
Hang tight. Hey, Di, that was fun, man. That was a lot of fun today with Matt and Audra.
Totally fun. And it got me thinking just about a lot of things. And I wish I had this conversation like 10 years ago.
Right.
From the standpoint of that would have been very helpful, especially during some of those troubling, let's just call it those early teen years.
Yes.
And those with daughters know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yes. And, but regardless, I hope everyone got value from today's conversation. And man, I feel like there's still much to speak on this topic. So this is great.
I think so. I agree. So have a great weekend, my friend. I am going to as well. I'm going to go celebrate my wife's birthday this evening. And
Wait, hey, you saw that game last night, I hope.
And we'll talk to you later.
I got Canucks are up 3-2. I'm not going to jinx it though. Here we go.